When your own daughter looks you in the eye and tells you you're just a burden, you realize you're no longer welcome. Not even in the place where you gave everything. I sold my car to pay off her debts, gave up my dreams so she could chase hers, and in the end, I was treated like a nuisance. My name is Edward. Subscribe to our channel and watch until the end, because this story doesn't end the way you think. I'm 67 years old, a widower for more than a decade, and for the past few years, I live with my daughter, her husband, and my two grandkids, kids I helped raise from the cradle. When my wife died, I thought silence would be the hardest part, but it wasn't. What really hurt was being ignored while I was still trying to speak. I didn't ask to move in with them. I was invited. I was brought in as support, as backup, as someone they could lean on. Of course I said yes. I said yes out of love. But time has this strange way of turning love into routine and routine into resentment. My daughter meant everything to me. I remember crying the day she was born, just from holding those tiny fingers. And when her mother passed away, I made a quiet promise to myself. Nothing bad would ever touch her while I was still breathing. I kept that promise with everything I had. I sold my car when she needed the money. I canceled trips. I even turned down a chance at love again because she said she didn't want strangers in the house. I was the kind of father who always said yes, even when everything inside me was begging to say no. And maybe that's why, over time, I started to disappear. At first, living with her seemed right. I helped take care of the boys. I cooked. I made sure her husband had medicine when he got sick. I even had a favorite chair in the living room. Then one day, that chair was gone, replaced by a new one, and no one said anything. I had been replaced too. They joked that the food didn't need salt anymore because Dad can't taste it anyway. They laughed, and I laughed along with them, but inside, it was already starting to sting. Slowly, I stopped hearing my name in that house. I became he, or the old man. My glass was always filled last. I was the last to hear any news, if I heard anything at all. They talk about vacations, birthdays, and future plans, and the only time I heard my name was when a bill came due. Maybe you know what I mean. When people only remember you when they need something, it means they've already started to erase you. Even my grandkids, who used to run into my arms, began calling me the grandpa from the back room. One of them once said, "Mom said you're not supposed to touch the kitchen stuff." I stood there in the hallway with the kettle in my hand, frozen. That's when it hit me. I wasn't wanted anymore. I was just tolerated, and only as long as I still serve a purpose. My son-in-law, who used to call me Mr. Ed, now just said him. Sometimes when he thought I wasn't listening, I became that old guy upstairs. At first, I wondered if it was all in my head, but then the signs became too clear to ignore. My bedroom door started turning up locked. Notes on the fridge had rules that only applied to me. My daughter's eyes said everything she didn't. I had become an interruption, a gap between breakfast and dinner. I started walking slower, not because of age, but to see if anyone would notice I was missing. Eating alone in my room became a habit, not by choice, but because I didn't feel like I belonged anymore. I tested it once. I stayed in my room all day. No one noticed. I started writing in a notebook, little phrases, thoughts with nowhere to go. I've never been good at talking about feelings, but writing felt like shouting without bothering anyone. And the more I wrote, the more I understood. I was fading inside my own home. One night, I sat on the stairs. I didn't listen to their conversations out of curiosity. I listened because I missed hearing my name. I missed when Dad came with love and not frustration. And it was on those stairs that I heard something that changed everything. My daughter was talking to her husband. Her voice was low, but I heard it clearly. He's already given everything he had. Now he's just a burden. Silence followed. Her husband didn't disagree. He just said, "Yeah," and kept eating. I sat there, breathing slowly, and for the first time in my life, I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. I just thought, so this is it. And that's when I decided it was time to go. Not to make a point, not to get attention, just to leave before they pushed me out. I tried to pretend I hadn't heard it. I swear I did. Spent days telling myself she was just tired, just upset, that she didn't mean it. But none of that mattered. That sentence stuck to me like a bad smell. Now he's just a burden. And suddenly, everything around me seemed to agree. No one said good morning anymore. The coffee was ready for everyone, except me. Conversations would die the moment I stepped into the room. It was like her words had opened some invisible door, giving everyone permission to ignore me without guilt. I started noticing things. The bank letters stopped coming. I asked about them. My daughter said, nothing important showed up. But I knew that wasn't true. I asked to see the bills. She told me everything was taken care of. But her voice was too sweet. And I've learned over the years, people who sound too sweet usually have something bitter hiding underneath. Then came the final blow. My grandson walked into my room and asked me, with that brutal honesty only kids have, "Grandpa, when are you leaving?" "Mommy said you're going soon." My hand froze. My chest too. But I smiled. The kind of smile you wear just to keep from falling apart in front of someone who still believes you're strong. I kissed his forehead, then cried quietly in the bathroom. Because some pain you don't share with anyone. My son-in-law, meanwhile, stopped pretending altogether. He wouldn't look at me, wouldn't say hello. One night, I dropped a glass. He stepped right over the shards and muttered, "This place is long overdue for some cleaning." Like I was part of the mess. And maybe to him, I was just a piece of furniture out of place. Then my daughter started saying the house felt small. The boys needed more space. "Dad, you understand, right? Kids need room to play. Your room could become Lucas's studio." Lucas was 7. 7. I just nodded. I didn't mention that room existed because of me. I sold my car to help pay for it. I never cared about getting credit. But in that moment, I regretted it deeply. What she didn't know, or maybe forgot, was that I've always been cautious. I had savings set aside, even before I moved in with her. I used to call that money my dignity fund. Used it twice, once when she broke her foot, and once when her husband lost his job. The rest, I left untouched. Until now. Now it had a new name. My escape plan. And that's when I found the proof I didn't even know I was looking for. A paper in the trash. A loan simulation in my name, with a signature that wasn't mine. I didn't confront them. I just kept it. And understood. They were trying to get rid of me without actually asking me to leave. And the worst part? They weren't even hiding it. That day, something shifted in me. It felt like the ground I'd held for years was finally giving me permission to stand up for myself again. I went to my room, pulled out the notebook where I'd been scribbling thoughts, and wrote just one sentence. "I'm not trash. I can still walk." That was the first time I wrote something as a plan, not a vent, not a reflection, a plan. From that point on, I started putting it together. Checked the account. Enough money. Looked up small towns, cheap inns, night buses. Refilled my prescriptions. Started going on evening walks, saying it was just to stretch my legs, but really, I was observing. Schedules, gates, silences. And every step I took felt like learning to breathe again after years underwater. I still didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay, because staying meant dying on my feet. And I had already died in silence for far too long. I started slowly, not because I wanted to be dramatic, but because I learned that people who yell too loud just scare others off, and those who leave quietly sometimes leave the deepest mark. I began folding clothes, only the ones I didn't wear much, the kind no one would miss if they were gone. Then came the documents, ID, birth certificates, bank card. I tucked them into a small folder that fit at the bottom of my backpack. Just one backpack, because I was just one now too. I went to the bank and withdrew part of my savings. Did it calmly, without raising suspicion. Looked the teller in the eyes when she asked if I was going on a trip. I said yes, but it was more than that. It was a release, a journey away from the place where I had stopped being welcome. I went back home and kept living the days like usual. Set the table, picked up the toys, watched the news with the volume low. But now, everything felt like a last time. Last dish washed. Last good night that no one replied to. Last forgotten cup of coffee. I thought about writing a letter. Grabbed paper, pen. Started with, "I forgive you." But the words felt bitter. Not because the forgiveness wasn't real, but because they didn't even know there was something to be forgiven. I tore it up, left the page in the trash. I wasn't leaving anything behind, because sometimes silence is the only inheritance you can leave. I kept just one photo, the three of us smiling, holding hands on a beach in Yubataba. My wife in the middle, my daughter as a little girl jumping between us. That day, I had everything. Today, I only had the memory. But that was already more than they were willing to let me keep. The night before I left, my daughter looked at me with annoyance and said, "Dad, you should go to bed earlier. You're getting in the way around here." I just smiled. But inside, the answer was already there. "This is the last time I hear your voice." And it was. I woke up at 4 a.m. Not from an alarm. My body just knew. Took a quick shower. Put on the clothes I had laid out the night before. Backpack on my shoulders. Walked through the house in silence like I always had. I didn't slam the door. Didn't leave a note. Didn't look back. As I walked down the empty street, a cold breeze brushed my face. It felt like the world whispering, "Go. There's still time." And I went. Without guilt. Without goodbyes. Because when you leave unseen, there's no need for anyone to come looking. And right there on that dark sidewalk, I realized it didn't push me out with shouting. They did it with silence. With neglect. With eyes that no longer saw me. And when the world stops seeing you, you have every right to walk away and start being real again. I arrived early. The bus station smelled like stale coffee and wet floors. No one was waiting for me. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't hurt. It felt like freedom dressed up as anonymity. I picked a small town, named after a saint, with streets named after flowers. Asked for a room in the simplest boarding house I could find. All I wanted was silence. In the silence there, it was honest. No judgment, no whispers, no dishes left untouched. Just the hum of a fan and the sound of my own thoughts. In the first few days, I barely went out. Walked to the bakery, came back, read last week's newspaper. Bought a new notebook, black cover, no lines. Started writing memories of my wife. Not like someone writing a book. More like someone talking to someone who no longer answers, but still listens. At the park, I'd sit on a bench in the shade. Watch the world go by. Rushed mothers, quiet old men, kids still playing with fallen leaves. No one knew me, and that felt strange, but also relieving. Being nobody has a kind of power. You can start everything over, or start nothing at all. The woman who ran the boarding house was named Estella. She always had the TV on. Gave me soup the first night, then coffee, then silence. Until one day, she looked at me and said, "You've got the eyes of someone who's carrying a lot." I answered without thinking, "I'm learning to leave some of it behind." She didn't ask anything else. She was the one who showed me a flyer taped to the gate of a fruit shop. Hope Community Center, support for seniors, free services, conversation circles. I read it and slipped it into my pocket, not because I planned on going, but because, somehow, it made me feel included, even without an invitation. It took me a week. On the 8th morning, I found the courage. I went. It was an old 2-story building with peeling paint and the smell of fresh cake. There was laughter, the sound of dominoes, people with white hair but bright eyes. When I walked in, I didn't say my name. Just sat down. A man with a cane smiled at me. His eyes looked familiar. And when he spoke, my memory jumped back 30, 40 years. "Edward? No way. Is that really you?" It was Ray, my old friend. We used to play guitar together, fight over dumb things, and promise we'd grow old with dignity. Looks like one of us did. We hugged, and for a moment, time stood still. There in that nearly forgotten center, something lit up inside me. It wasn't joy, not yet. It was just recognition. And sometimes, being recognized, even by just one person, is already the beginning of a whole new story. Ray took me to the little kitchen at the center, showed me where they kept the coffee, where the deck of cards stayed, and the corner of the roof that still leaked when the rain got heavy. The place was close to shutting down. Just a few regulars left, no funding. But there was plenty of silence and a deep longing for better days. I didn't say I had experience, didn't present myself as anything special. I just watched, then carefully suggested, "What if we start with a shared breakfast? Everyone brings a piece of bread, we make some tea, and just talk." They liked the idea. The next week, there were 8 of us at the table. Then came the memory games, story circles, old photos pulled from dusty boxes. And suddenly, that place that once felt like just a shelter became a home again. A home where no one had to apologize for existing. The neighborhood started to notice. First, it was the curious glances. Then the baker dropped off fresh rolls. The seamstress brought tablecloths. Kids began passing by just to see the old man who tells funny stories. And I started laughing again. Real laughter. The kind that doesn't worry about bothering anyone. I started writing letters. Not to my daughter, but to my wife. Told her how the center was changing. How Ray still told terrible jokes. How they called me Mr. Ed. Until one day a kid from the street shouted, "Hey, Grandpa Ed, the game's about to start." And that undid me inside. I hugged the boy. He must have been 6. Dirty face, bright smile, no rush to grow up. I felt like I belonged. For the first time in years, I felt needed. Not because I paid for that place, but because someone truly needed me. The newspaper story came later. A young reporter showed up, curious about the buzz. Took photos, listened to stories, laughed at Ray's corny jokes. My name only appeared once, in the caption of photo. But that was enough. Seeing that center smile again was everything I needed. I still made bread every Sunday. Spread margarine, set it on a tray, and asked, "Who wants coffee and a story today?" And there was always someone. People with deep wrinkles and hopeful eyes. No one there called me a burden. They called me by name. And after everything, that meant more than any inheritance. But the peace we build isn't always forever. Because the past, sooner or later, always finds out where you've gone to hide. It took about 2 months, just long enough for me to start thinking the past had forgotten me. But all it takes is someone touching the money, and suddenly everyone remembers who you are. My daughter went to the bank, saw the account nearly empty, and panicked. They told her I had withdrawn everything myself. Valid ID, calm demeanor, no rush. She didn't believe it. Preferred to say I was confused, that I must have had some kind of episode. She filed a police report, said I had vanished, might be in danger. But the officer was blunt. "Ma'am," he walked out on his own. "There's no crime here." That's when the story changed. She started claiming I wasn't mentally stable. Tried filing for guardianship. But the lawyer I met months earlier, back in my old town, had already filed everything. Mental health evaluation. Statement of intent. Power of attorney. All the paperwork, signed and sealed. I call that file. In case they try to erase me. She hadn't seen that coming. Thought I was still the same as always, quiet, reliable, easy to bend. But a man is only fragile until he realizes he still has worth. A distant relative, my late brother-in-law's cousin, found the article about the community center. Recognized me in the photo. I was holding a cup of coffee, laughing next to Ray. He shared the link in the family group chat. And that was it. Boom. She saw it. Cried for what they say. But it wasn't longing. It was pride wounded. Shock, realizing the burden had a name, an address, and was being celebrated. Still, she thought she could fix it. Reached out to the journalist. Called the boarding house. Contacted the city office. Said she was my daughter. That she was worried. That she just wanted to talk. But people who want to talk don't start by trying to declare you mentally unfit. They don't make up stories about breakdowns that never happened. I heard she was coming. Estella let me know gently. Said she didn't want to stir trouble, but thought I should be aware. I took a deep breath. Didn't shake. Didn't run. Just made the coffee with a little more care that Saturday morning. And let the past knock on the door. Because now, I knew how to answer it, without letting it back in. It was Saturday morning. The community center already smelled like fresh bread and hot coffee. I was setting the tables just like always. Ray was placing the chairs outside, and people trickled in one by one. The routine was peaceful, and in that place, routine was a gift. Then I saw her, standing at the door, frozen, wearing the same look she had as a child when she broke something and didn't know how to fix it. My daughter. She didn't say a word, just looked at me. Still. I stood still too for a second. But that was it. I went back to serving the bread. Because in that moment, she was just another visitor. And this was my place now. She walked slowly to one of the benches in the back. Sat down like someone carrying a weight they've stopped trying to justify. She cried. Quietly. Maybe she expected me to come to her first. But not this time. I finished serving everyone. Then walked over to her. Calm steps. She lifted her eyes and whispered, "Dad." My voice came out steady, but clear. "I don't blame you. But today, I'm not going back." She lowered her head. maybe hoping for another chance. But this wasn't about punishment. It was about protection. Mine. Because not every reconciliation comes with a hug. Some come with a boundary. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the only thing I had taken from her house. That old photo of the three of us on the beach. I handed it to her gently and said, "You lost me once and didn't even notice. Now, you've lost me again. But this time I found myself." She held the photo like it carried an apology she didn't know how to say. Then she stood, slowly, and left. No shouting, no scene, just the sound of her footsteps on the center's floor. And I exhaled, for the first time since walking out of that house. I breathed like someone who had taken a stone off his chest. Because when you stop waiting for others to truly see you, that's when you start, really, to exist. After that Saturday, everything became clearer. Her visit didn't leave a wound. It left certainty. Certainty that I'd made the right decision. That it was time to turn what had saved me into a shelter for others. I took what was left of my savings. Nothing grand, but enough to renovate the rooms of the center. I replaced the chairs, had the front repainted, bought books, new mugs, cozy rugs. And I had a sign made without my name on it. I called the new project New Name. Because that's what we needed. People who had lost their identity with age. People who were only ever called a burden, a problem, an expense. Here, they'd be called something else, valued. The center began to bloom. Women arrived with stories stuck in their throats. Callous men who had forgotten how to smile. We listened. We welcomed. We offered coffee and time. We started with basic medical care. Then came the story circles, Sunday dinners. Local nonprofits got involved. The city helped with supplies. Social work students wanted to intern there. And all of it, without anyone asking who was in charge. Because the real owner was time. And time, in that place, was generous. One day, a team of documentarians showed up. They had seen the old article and wanted to film the project. So they did. They told our stories. They spoke about the impact. When they asked if I wanted to be interviewed, I simply said, "Talk about the project." My name doesn't need to be in the credits. Breakfast became a ritual. So did the hugs. People who hadn't been touched gently in years now greeted each other with kisses on the forehead. In that space, every wrinkle was the title of a chapter too beautiful to forget. Then, one rainy Tuesday, a new man arrived. His coat was soaked, his eyes were nervous, his steps unsure. He looked at me and said, "They told me you know how to disappear." I smiled and said, "I do. But now we show up in our own way." And that's how that place, built from scraps and silences, became a home for those who only wanted to exist again with a name, a story, and respect. Sometimes I think about that day. The stairs, the small plate, the muffled voice saying I was just a burden. And now I realize that wasn't an insult. It was a gift in disguise. Maybe I was heavy, yes, but only because I carried the world on my shoulders. Her childhood, the household debts, the griefs I swallowed in silence, the absences I filled with presence. Growing old isn't about becoming light. It's about becoming full of memories, of mistakes, of efforts, full of love no one noticed, full of stories no one wanted to hear anymore. Today, I walk slowly to the gate of the center. I see the benches filled. I hear laughter. I smell fresh coffee. And I think maybe the legacy I left behind doesn't have my name on it, but it has my face in every small gesture repeated in there. I never asked for recognition. I just didn't want to be erased. And in a way, I wasn't. My name's not on the signs. But everyone knows who the kind-eyed old man is, the one who serves tea at 5. One of the boys from a neighborhood asked me the other day, "Grandpa Ed, what does it mean to be old?" I answered without thinking, "Being old means being a root, son. And roots aren't meant to be pulled out. They're meant to be respected." Life didn't give me the happy ending I once imagined, but it gave me a different kind of ending. One where I learned to see myself with kindness again. One where I stopped being a burden and became a foundation. And if one day someone calls me a burden again, I'll smile. Because now I know this burden held up generations. And no one carries that much without the strength to start over.